And good afternoon, producer Susan. I understand you're feeling a little under the weather today.
Yep, too much football this weekend.
Too much football today. So yeah, Penn State won, great game. Except, of course, here in New Jersey, halfway through the game, they cut it when the Rutgers game started. I guess the home team crowd demanded to see Rutgers, so that's what we had. So we only got to
I
see.
think you need to protest.
I don't think they're going to do much good. Yeah, you're in Jersey. Tell you, well, we want you to leave the Pennsylvania game on because we don't want to see the Rutgers game. I don't
You
think.
know, the theory is we only so Rutgers, for those that don't know, Rutgers is in the Big Ten with Penn State, and the only reason why we let Rutgers into the Big Ten is so we could have the New York City media outlets.
Well, anyway, but it
We're
was
only using them for their media.
all right. So it's all right. All right. So you're not feeling good. So I got a lot of clips. You won't have to do a lot of talking. Anyway, um, I've got our quote of the week is from a great book called Why Nations Failed, and the second thing was almost going to be my clip of the week, but it's a video clip of Warren Buffett. We all know who Warren Buffett is, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
he's giving advice to a room full of college students on how to be successful in life and why it has very little to do with your IQ. And I just wish somebody had given me advice when I was 19 or 20. Now, by the way, I've since learned it over the course of my life, but I wish I'd learned it sooner. Um, we're going to give some additional level. We're going to came across some interesting comparison about gun laws in various states and how state gun laws affect gun crime. Very, very interesting comparison. We're going to compare Illinois with Maine. Illinois, of course, which has Chicago, some of the toughest gun laws in the country, with Maine, which has almost no state level gun laws, and we'll compare those two. Um, I've got a great little clip. It's monotone, it's a little boring, but a guy gives a great explanation of the difference between a democracy, which the United States is not, and a constitutional republic, and why it's such an important difference and why you don't want to be a democracy. Even though every time Kamala Harris opens her mouth, we have to save our democracy. It kind of grates at me like, nails on a chalkboard, because we're not a democracy. Um, I've got a great clip, hilarious. It starts with a guy interviewing a bunch of white people, and who all tell the interview why voter ID laws are racist, and then compare those claims when he goes to Harlem and asks a bunch of black people if they have voter IDs, and if they didn't have one, if we knew where to get them. I think it's hilarious. And when we at the end, we're going to ask who are the real racists, because I think it was the white people who think that black people don't have picture IDs. In our Be Careful What You Wish For segment, we'll tell you why New York City is asking help from the governor of New York so it can suspend some of its own self-imposed sanctuary city requirements. I just found that hilarious. And in light of the Georgia school shooting last week, we'll share with the listeners a study, a 20-year study comparing shooting deaths in schools that allow specially trained teachers and staffs to carry concealed weapons in the building versus those who don't. You've heard of that program. It's called
Yeah.
FASTER.
Yeah.
And finally, our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from Capitol Heights, Maryland, where a restaurant employee shoots and kills an armed robber. And I know you're not feeling good, so we try not to ask you too many questions. But so here we go from the book "Why Nations Failed." And by the way, it's from the authors Darren Daron Asamuelo and James Robinson. Just Google "Why Nations Failed," and here's the quote. It says, a businessman who expects his output to be stolen or expropriated or entirely taxed away will have little incentive to work, let alone any incentive to undertake investments and innovations. I think this goes back to a conversation we had a week or two ago about why 99 out of the 100 most important inventions came out of capitalist countries, right?
Yeah. We talk about capitalist versus socialist countries all the time on this show.
Right, because they're incentivized to take risks. But if everything you work for is going to be stolen, expropriated, or taxed away, why would you bother? Why would you take those crazy risks? Because if you fail, the government doesn't come back to you. Oh, you failed. You gambled your life savings, you mortgaged your house, you gambled $500,000 and you lost it all. They're not going to. Here's your money back. They're not going to say that. If you fail, you fail. So again, here's a quote. A businessman who expects his output to be stolen, expropriated, or taxed away will have little incentive to work, let alone any incentive to undertake investments and innovations. So I just think that goes along with what we've talked about the past couple of weeks. All right. Now we all know who Warren Buffett is, right? Head of Berkshire Hathaway.
Mhm.
He's one of the 5 richest men in the world.
Yep.
Berkshire Hathaway, by the way, owns, I think, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, along with Dairy Queen, Fruit of the Loom Underwear. Berkshire Hathaway is just a huge company, all very, very successful. And here's Warren Buffett telling this room full of college students how to be successful without, and you don't have to be brilliant. And here we go. I may have to turn up the volume here a little bit.
It's not IQ. I'm sure you'll all be glad to hear that. Everybody in this room has more IQ than they need to do my job. The big thing is rationality. In other words, I always look at IQ and talent as sort of representing the horsepower of the motor. But then in terms of the output, the efficiency with which the motor works, that depends on rationality, because a lot of people start out with 400 horsepower motors and get 100 horsepower of output. And it's way better to have a 200 horsepower motor and get it all into output. And so why do smart people do things that interfere with really getting the output they're entitled to? And it gets into habits and to character and to temperament, and it really gets into behaving in a rational manner. It's not getting in your own way. As I say, everybody here has the ability absolutely to do anything I do and much beyond. And some of you will, and some of you won't. But it will. The ones that won't, it will be because you get in your own way. It won't because the world doesn't allow you to. It will be because you don't allow yourself to. So I have one little suggestion for you. Pick out the person in the class that you admire the most, and then write down why you admire them. Put down a list of qualities. You're not to name yourself in this. And then put down the one that frankly you could stand the least in the whole group, and put down the qualities that turn you off in that person, and look at that list, and you won't find it's a bunch of things like throwing a football 70 yards or anything of the sort. The qualities of the first one that you admire are qualities that you, with a little practice, can make your own, and which, if practiced, will become habit forming. The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. I mean, my age, I can't change any of my habits. I mean, I'm stuck. But at your age, you will have the habits 20 years from now that you decide to put into practice today. So I just suggest that you look at the habits you admire in others, or the behavior you admire in others, and make those your own habits, and you look at what you really find somewhat reprehensible in others, and just decide, those are things you're not going to do. Ben Franklin did that a few hundred years ago, and it still works today. And if you do that, you'll find that you convert all your horsepower into output.
So what'd you think of what Warren Buffett said? Have you ever noticed that about you can have some really smart people
Absolutely.
do incredibly irrational things or things that make them that hurt their effectiveness?
I know. I also noticed a lot of very well-educated people that have zero common sense.
I know. And by the way, it talks a bit. So, and I kind of learned this over the years. I had various mentors. I worked with people. I had bosses I really admired. And I asked myself, man, I learned a lot from Larry, and I really like the way Larry handles this type of situation. So I tried to mimic that. And then I find people that, and I had some really bad bosses, and I say, why was this guy such a bad boss? The guy was brilliant, but he was an awful boss. And nobody wanted to work for him. I mean, I didn't want to work for him, and he had this horrible staff turnover. So I'm saying, well, this guy might have been brilliant, but he was just an awful leader, and he was an awful leader because of A, B, and C. So I want to make sure I'm never like him. So I kind of learned this through osmosis over the years. And by the way, things you find reprehensible and abhorrent, Donald Trump, I would never, I hope to never emulate some of the bad behaviors that Donald Trump emulates.
Yeah.
So have you ever done this in your life and say, yep, I really like the way Sally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wish somebody had told me that when I was 20. Again, I learned it I learned it through osmosis. But again, I think it's brilliant advice. Look at people you admire, look at people who are effective,
Mhm.
and emulate what the things they do, and then look at people who are not effective and don't do what they do. Not because they're stupid, but because of how they behave or
Mhm.
handle things. And it has nothing to do with IQ. So that's our free, that's kind of like life advice from Warren Buffett. And I can
Mhm.
tell you from personal experience, it's great advice. If you're young or just starting out, or if you've got kids, if you're older and you have, college age kids or kids just getting out of college, you might want to play that clip for them because again, look at people you admire, look at people who are successful and say, what do they do that make them that way? And then try to mimic that and look at people who are ineffective and say, I know why this person is not effective, and I'm going to try not to do what they do. All right. I'm not going to ask you a bunch of questions because your voice. So I'm just going to move on to our comparison of gun laws in Illinois and Maine and how they affect, um, how they affect gun violence. So, you know, when you compare how successful or unsuccessful Illinois' mountain of gun laws have been in terms of reducing gun violence in that state versus Maine, which has elected not to implement virtuous any of those additional gun laws. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be gun laws, but once you go beyond a basic level of compliance like background checks and, you can't have a gun if you're a felon, you can't buy a gun if you're 14. But once you go beyond a basic level of compliance and restrictions, it does not appear that additional gun laws have any material effect on reducing gun violence. And a stark example of that truth can be seen comparing the gun homicide rates in the highly regulated state of Illinois with the relatively unregulated state of Maine. Now,
Mhm.
as I said, both states follow all federal regulation when it comes to the sale and possession of guns, including federal background checks, no sale or possession of guns to felons or minors. However, once you go beyond there, Illinois has added a whole host of additional restrictions, such as magazine capacity limits, the need to have a state-issued firearm owner's ID card known as an FOID card, which New Jersey has, to not only buy a gun, you also need to have an FOA just to walk in the store and buy a box of ammunition. You want to buy a box of shotgun shells to go duck hunting with? You need to have an FOID card. You're not even buying a gun. Um, Illinois has a prohibition against the sale or possession of any so-called assault weapons, and a daunting and expensive and time-consuming process to acquire concealed weapons carry permit, a CCW. Now, in contrast, the state of Maine has decided that they didn't need any of those additional restriction, and they don't even require the issuance of a permit for a person to carry a concealed weapon. They have what's called constitutional carry, which says, hey, here are the legal requirements you have to meet to carry a gun. You have to be citizen of the United States, you have to be over 21, no prior felony convictions, not under indictment, uh, never been charged with any spousal abuse. Um, so if you meet those, you can carry a concealed weapon, and you don't need to have a piece of paper from us to tell you that you have. And by the way, last
Mhm.
count, there were now 27 states in the United States that allow that. It's called constitutional carry, that if you're legally allowed to carry a concealed weapon, you can, and you don't need us to give you a piece of paper to make that legal. You're familiar with that, right?
Yep. I remember when you first moved to New Jersey, back to New Jersey, you couldn't
20,
buy the, what do you call
yeah,
them?
22 blinks. I went into Home
For
Depot. I
for
needed,
a tool for your garage.
yeah, concrete nail gun. Concrete nail guns, operate with a 22 blank. You put a 22 blank in there and you put the nail, it's a special nail, and you hit it with a hammer and that detonates the 22 blank and it drives the nail into the concrete. It goes bang and the nail goes in the concrete. So I walked in to buy a box of 22 blanks.
And
The guy
that's a
said,
tool. I
it's a
mean,
tool.
that's not
Yeah.
even a real gun or a
It's
real
not a real
shotgun.
gun. It's not a real bullet. It's a blank. But the guy says, "Where's your FOID card?" I said, "My what?" So I had to go over to Pennsylvania to buy some, because it took me over 6 weeks to get my FOID card so I could buy a box of ammunition or a box of blanks. Anyway, so we have this stark difference in gun regulations. So, with Illinois having a mountain of gun regulations and Maine having zero state level regulations. So, let's look at how that. First of all, how does that translate? Well, Maine has one of the highest gun ownership rates in the country. Household gun owner, 46.8%. Half the homes in Illinois, which is almost where Texas has. Remember, we do taxpayer relief shots. Everybody in Texas has a
Yeah.
gun. Well,
Yeah.
Maine is right up there. 1 out of 2 homes in there's a gun in 1 out of 2 homes in Maine, where in Illinois it's just 27.8%, 1 in 4 homes. So let's look at the gun homicide rates per 100,000 population. Illinois has one of the highest at 10.2 per 100,000, which is nearly twice the national average of 5.5. Can you imagine your gun homicide rate is, even with all those laws, you're still at twice the national
Yeah.
average? You want to yeah.
Illinois is ridiculous
Right.
with the laws, and yet they're one of the highest crime rates.
Right. Now, with the national gun homicide rate being 5.5 per 100,000, you want to take a guess where Maine comes in?
In crime rate, very low.
Gun homicide rates.
Very low.
You want to guess how low?
I'm gonna guess in the 40s.
Well, no, remember,
Out
it's
of the
5.
50s.
It's 5.5 is the national, 5.5 per 100,000.
Oh, I thought you meant like ranking in states.
No,
Like it's got to be one of the lowest states.
right, but it is. But you want to guess if national average is 5.5 gun homicides per 100,000, you want to guess where Maine comes in?
1.
Very close, 0.9 per 100,000.
Yep.
0.9. I think the only states lower than that, like North Dakota and Montana. So the question is, first of all, so do more guns translate to more gun violence, and do more state level gun laws make you safer? Well, it would appear, based on this comparison, the answers to both questions would appear to be a resounding no, because again, Maine has more guns per capita than 47 other states, and yet their gun homicide rate is the third lowest in the country. So no, more guns don't mean more gun deaths. And do more state level gun control laws make you safer? Well, not if you look at Illinois, which has this mountain of gun laws, and yet their gun homicide rate is twice the national average. So
I mean, Chicago is probably one of the last cities I want to be visiting anytime soon.
Followed close behind by Philadelphia, which is where the
Yeah.
debate is tonight. So
Yeah, and I find the irony that the DNC was in Chicago and the debates in Philly
in
tonight.
Philadelphia, yeah, 2 of the most dangerous cities. And by the way, I think St. Louis still holds the top spot. But rounding out the top spot, top 5, I think, are St. Louis, Philadelphia, Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans. Which, by what do all those cities have in common?
They all have Democratic mayors.
For the last 1 or 2 years, or the last 2 decades?
Probably the last decade.
Yeah, several decades. Oh, and I forgot Washington, D.C., by the way. Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
All right. So you ready for a boring primer on difference between a democracy and a republic, a constitutional republic, and why you don't want to be
I think this is important since Kamala keeps throwing these terms around.
Yeah, we have to save our democracy. Here we go. And again, apologize for this guy's tone. He's boring, but his words are important.
Political system in which the people periodically, by majority vote at the polls, select their rulers. The rulers then have
Well, by the way, the first thing what he's describing right now is democracy. I'm going to start this over. Here we go.
a political system in which the people periodically, by majority vote at the polls, select their rulers. The rulers then have absolute power to make whatever laws they please by majority vote among themselves. In a constitutional republic, the people also, by majority vote at the polls, select rulers, who make laws by majority vote among themselves. But the rulers cannot make any laws they please because the Constitution severely restricts their lawmaking power. The ideal of a democracy is universal equality. The ideal of a constitutional republic is individual liberty. In this century, great strides have been made toward the goal of subverting our republic and transforming it into a democracy. The foremost tactic of the subverters is subversion of language. By calling America a democracy until people thoughtlessly accept and use the term, totalitarians have obscured the real meaning of American principles of government.
All right, and let me give you just an extreme example. In a pure democracy, without a constitution, if 51% of the people want to make slavery legal, slavery would be legal. If 51% of the people said we don't want the Muslim religion to be practiced in this country, you couldn't be a practicing Muslim in this country. In a constitutional republic, the Constitution protects the rights of the minority. So I just, and he's got a point that, you know, the many on the left are actually trying to convince people that we're a democracy. And once you're a democracy, by the way, you lose the protections of the Constitution. So again, I don't want you to try to talk too much, but what did you think of his comparison between the two?
Yeah, and you know, I'm in a bunch of different organizations where it's not a democracy but a quorum, which is usually, you know, 2/3 vote to pass anything, not just
So it's super majority. Okay.
Yeah.
But most organizations, by the way, you know, have some sort of a charter, if you will, which is their constitution. You know, it says, you know, like if you want to change the president, you know, here's how you have to go about it. Even they have laws. So again, but he has a point that there's a reason, and I don't think it's by accident people like Kamala Harris keep referring to our democracy. But Joe Biden has been doing this for the last couple of years. He keeps saying our democracy. No, we are not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. You don't put everything up to a popular vote, and the Constitution protects the rights of minority. All right.
Also, though, keep in mind,
there we go.
People periodically by majority vote.
All right. Sorry about that.
but these are also the same people who want to get rid of the electoral college and want to go back to the popular vote.
Right, and go to popular vote, which, and we've talked about that before. I won't go into it today, but that's completely unworkable, and it would also minimize the rights of the minorities. The founders were not stupid when they said every state gets two senators, and electoral college is going to be based on your representation. By the way, that's how electoral votes by state are determined. You get one vote for every member of Congress. So if you're Rhode Island and you have 2 senators and 1 congressional representative, you have 3 electoral votes. If you're Pennsylvania, you have 2 senators, maybe you've got 7 congressional districts, you get 9 votes in the electoral college. So that's how electoral college votes are decided, by the number of people your state has in Congress. All right. I'm going to move on to this clip of this guy asking a bunch of young white liberals what they think of voter ID laws, and they all think they're racist as hell. And then he's going to go talk to some black people and ask them the same question. So here we go.
Usually pretty racist and they're bad. I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely. Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think?
So he's saying, well, if you're black and you're poor, you can't access the internet. All right, I want you to remember that.
That's harder for black people to go online.
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
They don't have the knowledge. They're stupid and uneducated.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data. For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware, or
they don't know, they're not aware.
Like they're not informed. I also think there's a repression of like black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, like you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the like African Americans.
So a whole bunch of African Americans are convicted felons.
Now I'm here in East Harlem to ask black people their thoughts on what you just heard. Do you have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yeah, it's not state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID? That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so we know what we need to carry around.
Yeah, everybody that I know have ID. Like, that's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Do you know any black adult who doesn't have an ID? And she says, no, I don't. Harriet, you good?
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of, trick candy cameras?
I know, right? That's the only thing I brought with me.
Legit,
They're all pulling out their IDs. Every person is pulling out their IDs and showing them. Here we.
I heard a lot also that, Black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that, on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Did you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
Oh.
I know you sound like a silly question. You know how to get DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that Black people, especially poor Black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid can figure out how to work the internet.
I've had access to the internet for years.
Know how to use it properly, right?
Exactly. I do it at work. So of course I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually
Unlimited.
Unlimited data.
Mm-hmm. I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of Black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's my thought process on it.
I just think that's ignorant. Ignorant.
Ignorant. That's the
Very,
word I hear
very
a lot.
ignorant.
Ignorant.
Very, very ignorant.
Does it sound racist for somebody to say that?
I think it is a little racist because, you know, you're putting people in a category and you have no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe a little bit of racist in it, but like I said, I think it's more stupidity and ignorance.
Judging somebody, like, but you're judging them because they black, saying that they don't got it.
People are they talking to? Who are these people talking to?
Do you have a problem that if you go to vote and they say, "Can we please see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are"? Are you
Love
cool?
showing my ID.
You got no problem with that?
Nope.
Would you have a problem if when you go to vote, if they say, "Can we please just see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are"? Do you have an issue with that?
No.
Would you have a problem if there was a rule where you have to show your ID in order to vote?
I don't think so. No.
Would you have an issue if there was a rule saying you got to show your ID before you vote?
Nah.
You cool with that?
Yeah.
So, what do you think? Were those well-meaning liberals racist in their ignorance?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
well-
gotta say, right before we started this podcast, I was at my local drugstore buying some Dayquil, and guess what? I got asked for my ID.
ID, right? Yeah, if you want to buy Claritin or Dayquil, whatever, you got to show that. By the way, if you're on Medicaid, which is a medical coverage that all poor people qualify for, if you want to get any sort of medical or hospital or see a doctor with your Medicaid card, guess what? You have to show your picture ID to make sure that you're the person who the Medicaid card says you are.
Mhm.
So again, I think they're well-meaning, but I think their attitudes that black people are not well informed. They don't know how to use the internet. They don't have IDs. They don't know where to get an ID. I just think that's a terribly racist attitude in terms of how you perceive black people in this country. So it's sad. Producer Susan, hopefully you can put that link up on the website
Yeah, absolutely.
once you're feeling better. So, all right. Let me move on to my next topic. Oh, this one, I woke up this morning and watched the news, and this one made me laugh. So I'm watching the news. Now, we all know that New York City is a sanctuary city, right?
Yep.
Now, it got to be a sanctuary city back between 2014 and 2018 when they had the socialist mayor, Bill de Blasio. They put all these he said, we need to be, a sanctuary city. So they put all these ballot measures on, and he encouraged people. So they self-imposed, they declared themselves to be a sanctuary city, and they imposed a bunch of requirements on themselves, which says, number one, we will not notify if we, say we arrest an illegal alien for some crime, shoplifting or whatever. We will not notify, and if we arrest somebody, we determine that the person is here illegally, we will not only won't we not notify ICE that we have an illegal immigrant in custody. If ICE becomes aware that we have an illegal immigrant in custody, do you know what a detainer request is?
To let them know that you have somebody in custody.
Well, a detainer request, if ICE becomes aware that, say somebody from ICE is watching the news and you see where they arrested somebody for beating up somebody else or shooting somebody else, and ICE says, oh, wait a minute, we've been looking for that guy.
Yeah.
And you guys have him in custody. They issue what's called a detainer request, which says, hey, we know you have him. We want him when you're done with him. So before you release him back onto the street, please notify us so that we can come pick him up, before he goes back on the street. Part of that sanctuary city is that it is illegal for anyone in their police or prison system to honor a detainer request, which means even though they know ICE wants this person, they are forbidden by New York City law to honor, and they'll just release this person back onto the street, even though ICE wants him. Well, the worm has turned, and as we all know from the news, with Venezuelan gangs beating up cops and illegal immigrants, raping women in Central Park, and actually killing people, they're being flooded with illegal immigrant crime. So now they want ICE to come get these people and get them the hell out of the city, but they illegally have tied their own hands that they're not legally allowed to do that. So to get around their own self-imposed prohibitions, they're asking the governor of New York to declare a state of emergency, which would illegally allow them to ignore their own prohibitions against cooperating with ICE. I mean, isn't that ironic that,
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
we don't want to follow the laws we imposed upon ourselves, but we tied our own hands. So Governor, can you please declare a state of emergency that we can legally ignore our own laws? It made me laugh out loud, because I think that's a great example of be careful what you wish for.
Absolutely.
All right. I know we've only got about 7 or 8 minutes left.
Yep, about 5 minutes. Yep.
All right. So real quick, because I want to get to our taxpayer relief shot. So, we had that awful school shooting in Georgia last week, right? And as we've talked in the past, there's a program called FASTER. You go to faster.org or fastersaveslives.org. That offers a week-long special training to volunteer teachers and school administrators how to act as, if you will, school security officers, and they allow those teachers and staff to carry concealed weapons in school during school hours. And here's a quote from a study, a 20-year study, because people say, oh, it's dangerous, there'll be accidental discharge, these people will be accidentally shooting other students, and there'll be accidental discharges. Here's a quote from the study. 20 states currently allow, 20, not 12, 20 states currently allow teachers and staff to carry guns to varying degrees in school property. So we don't need to guess, how the policy might work. There has yet to be a single case of someone being wounded or killed from a shooting by one of these authorized and trained individuals, let alone a mass public shooting between 6 a.m. and midnight at a school that lets teachers carry guns. Fears of teachers carrying guns in terms of such problems as students obtaining the teachers' guns have never occurred, and there was only one accidental discharge outside of school hours, and no one was harmed. While there have not been any problems at schools with armed teachers, the number of people killed at other schools has increased significantly, doubling between 2001 and 2008 versus between 2009 and 2018. So what he's saying, everybody's saying, oh, there's going to be, if you let teachers carry guns, students are going to get a hold of them, there's going to be accidental discharges, students are going to overpower teachers and take the guns. None of that has happened. And more importantly, in 20 states, thousands of trained teachers and staff, and I think it's over 1,000 schools out. There's not been one mass shooting in any of those schools, because most of those schools put a big sign out front that says, warning, this property is protected by armed staff, and we will shoot you if you try to hurt our students. So you can't argue with the data, right? There's apparently no downside and a lot of upside. And by the way, what stopped the Georgia shooting rampage was a good guy with a gun. They had a school security officer, and by most school shootings, the body count always goes into the double. I think Uvalde was 27 people. The one in Tennessee was like 14. This was 4 because within the first 2 minutes, the shooter was confronted by an armed security guard, because the shooting only stops when the shooter is confronted by a good guy with a gun. In this case, in Georgia, the good guy with a gun was an armed security officer. So that is true in every single shooting, that the shooting only stops when the shooter is confronted by a good guy with a gun. And if you don't have a good guy with a gun or a good woman with a gun in the building, then you're going to wait 10 or 15 minutes, for the good guy with the gun to get there. And we all know how many people can die even in a 5-minute response time, right?
Absolutely.
All right. How much time we got?
You have about 3 minutes.
All right. We're going right into our taxpayer relief shot without the preamble. Here we go, from Maryland.
that we first told you about last night, a deadly shooting inside a Capitol Heights restaurant on Marlboro Pike. News 4's Dominique Moody has the latest on the investigation.
One day after Prince George's County Police swarmed the parking lot of Oriental Express restaurant in Capitol Heights, the establishment's front doors, along with the windows, were shuttered. Prince George's investigators announcing today that 27-year-old Victor Rios Rubio was shot and killed inside of the business. Police say workers inside told investigators that Rubio was robbing the restaurant and assaulting employees. During the melee, police say an employee pulled out a gun and shot Rubio. When police got to the scene, they discovered Rubio suffering from gunshot wounds before dying a short time later.
To me, it's just like, wow, that's crazy. Like people, wow.
Gianni Cowan says he was inside one of the neighboring businesses before noticing dozens of officers in the plaza. He also is a frequent customer at the takeout restaurant.
The atmosphere is nice. The food is good. I like it personally. They know my whole order in there. So yeah, that's my favorite carryout.
Customers tell News 4 that the carryout has been operating for more than 20 years. Today, only flowers along with teddy bears could be seen outside. Police say no customers were inside at the time of the shooting. Prince George's County Police say they are working with the state's attorney's office to figure out if any charges will be filed in this case. In Prince George's County, Dominique Moody, News 4.
So once again, good guy with a gun, bad guy with a gun, and winds up dead. All right, TRT, dead right there. All right, I know we're running out of time, so you got anything to add before we sign off?
The debate is tonight. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to stay up to watch the debate, but I'm sure that you're going to have some commentary about it tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. Hang on. We're running. It's running again. All right. All right. So yes, I will. I'm going to, well, you can always tape it and watch in the morning. All right.
Yep.
Anyway, we're running out of time, so I want to thank everybody for listening, for giving up your 30 minutes. If you want to see links to any of this stuff in a day or so, producer Susan will have them up on jerzee-joe.com, and that's Jerzee, J-E-R, Z as in zebra, E-E, Jerzee, R, and R-Z-E-E, jerzee-joe.com. If you want to send me an email with a question, suggested show topic, or a comment, just email me at joe@jerzee-joe.com. And with that, producer Susan, I'll sign off and let you go back and then get some.
Yep, and also tomorrow is September 11th.
September 11th. Yes, and a very solemn day for us. All right, producer Susan, thank you for your help and getting out of your sick bed, and I'll talk to you next week. Hope you're feeling better.
Right.
Bye-bye.